Thank you very much. So I'm Sam Bunting, and my role in PA is that I transform large organisations into fast, innovative ones. What you're going to get from me today is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do that, and I'm going to give you, we've done a big survey, I'm going to give you some of the data that backs that up. Now, when I was preparing for this talk, I thought to myself, how can I make it really interesting for you guys? And I thought I'd start by thinking, who is the most innovative person I could find in the world? And my plan was, find this person, we could reflect and see what we could learn from that person. So I did what many of you would probably do. I opened up an internet browser. I actually looked through some books. I really put some time into this. It's pretty tricky to find the most innovative person in the world. Who is that person? How do we define it? But I found her. So let me present her to you. So she is a rocket scientist. So that's pretty innovative for a start, isn't it? Number one. And let me tell you a little bit about the rocket that she's built. So she's designed and built this rocket. So number one, I should say, the rocket is to get humanity back onto the moon, so to get man back onto the moon. And this rocket, number one, it runs completely on green energy. Number two, it can get humankind back to the moon in 1 hour, when it previously took 3 days when we've done it before. And also, it's entirely made of recyclable materials and completely reusable. So this is pretty damn innovative, right? And here is a picture of her working on the latest prototype. So this is actually my daughter. She's Poppy. She's 3.5. And there is a serious point to this sentimental story. And it's this, is that we are born creative. We're born innovators. We're born unshackled. But at some points along the way, we lose some of this over that 20, 30-year journey into large organizations, don't we? So I've done a little bit of research into that, and you probably know some of these stories yourself, but it's certainly a lot of studies point to the education system around the world. They say actually that by teaching us to learn by rote, by teaching us to pass exams, we're told that there's one right answer, and the other creative answers, they're the wrong answer. We're not taught problem solving anymore in schools either, so this seems to be a bit of a snag as well, doesn't it? I also personally think that the pressure, the hyper-connected society with LinkedIn and Facebook forces us to be normalized. It's certainly a normalizing force. But the facts remain when you look at the data. So if you look at IQ test data since they've been capturing, which is decades and decades, IQ test scores have gradually risen over time, which is quite interesting. I don't quite have the time to explain that to you, but that's the nature of it. And there's an equivalent index for creativity that actually over time also continued to rise in lockstep with the IQ test data. But it plateaued in the 90s. So it plateaued in the 90s. And that is a problem. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because if we look at the Fortune 500 companies that were around in 1959, as you probably know, only 9% of those organizations are around today. They got to be Fortune 500 companies because they're fantastic at what they did. The ones that are still around today are fantastic at changing, fantastic at adapting, and fantastic at innovating, and the rest of them has gone. So you would expect, I think, that organizations today would be positively fizzing with innovation, wouldn't you? But they're just not. They're just not. To talk about why that's the case, I'm going to wind the clock back now 100 years. I'm going to talk to you about the field of scientific management. So, I don't know if you know this is invented by Frederick Winslow Taylor. It's actually known as Taylorism. And what he did for the first time was he systemized work. He worked out in the industrial world, how do we systemize work? How do we scale big organizations and make them more effective, more productive, and more profitable? That's what he came up with. Gave rise to the concept of Fordism as well, which is a related movement that is what powered the Ford company to be the powerhouse automotive organization in the early part of the last century. And what Taylor came up with, he said that you can think of big organizations as machines. You can think of them as big machines, and the people in them are cogs in those machines, actually. And what you need to do, like a cog in a machine, is specialize very deeply that individual in the one thing they do, and keep those people in discipline-based areas in organizations. If you do that, you'll get much greater productivity, much greater profitability. And do you know what? It was hugely, hugely successful. So I'm not running it down. And it's actually the basis, particular Fordism is the basis of the way organizations are run today, in fact. So we recognize this, don't we? We build teams of specialists, we put them in teams of, in specialist homes, and then we have managers across the top to orchestrate the tasks, orchestrate the work. That's something we recognize, isn't it? But back in 1912, they were exploring this fantastic new movement, and they spotted a few problems. The first problem they noted was that people seemed to be less motivated, actually, when they were working this way. They didn't feel so much connection to the customer or to the finished good when they were working on their particular task. The second thing they noticed was that there was a great inequality between the leaders of the organisation and the actual workers of the organisation. So they also thought that was a problem as well. So two key issues with both Taylorism and Fordism. And if we turn to the innovation and look at organisations today, these are three real people, actually slightly prettier versions of these three real people, but they are real people. The guy on the left is a guy called Gary, and he works in accounts. And he has this fantastic idea to do something that will take him 3 days to do, that will save him 2 days and every month for the rest of the year. But he just doesn't have time to do it, because in the current system, that inspired by Taylorism and Fordism, there is no time to innovate. This lady is called Karen, and she works in a big bank, and she's working in the area of business banking. And as you may know, small and medium enterprises generate over 50% of the GDP of the world, so they're a hugely important component of the banking world. And she has a fantastic idea for a new proposition that is going to completely transform banking. But she just can't get it out, because her functional organisation working this way cannot join the dots in this direction to get this proposition out to the customers. So that is again letting her down. This guy on the right is a guy called Dave. He works in the mainstay of his organisation, but he has a fantastic new idea. It's a new business model, and it's in a brand new market. But he, again, can't get his functional leaders to appreciate what they need to do to get into that area. They don't want to take the risk. They want to run the hamster wheel 5% faster, because they don't, again, have that joined up view of what that proposition can do. So we call these types of innovation daily innovation, pipeline innovation, disruptive innovation, the 3 types of innovation that organizations need. And current ways of working are failing all 3 of those. So we have a problem. Now, I mentioned a survey. I'm going to spend a little more time in the land of Dr. Doom here, but I mentioned our survey. I thought I'd start to share with you, I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment, but I'd share with you some interesting insights. So one of the first questions we asked our survey respondents, which, by the way, were it's the most comprehensive survey we've done in this area of this type, 500 leaders from FTSE 100s, those types of organisations, CXOs, that type of level. We asked them what their biggest, or next biggest threat was going to be. We do have some audience participation coming up. You don't need to look worried, because it's not the time, because you'll never guess what organisations said their next biggest threat was going to be when I put it up. It's their customers. Their customers is their next biggest threat. So to tell you what they actually said, I've been economical with words here. They said their inability to meet emerging customer demands and emerging customer needs. That tells us 2 things, doesn't it? It tells us that organisations are just not fast enough. It also tells us a little bit how we think about it. It's this Taylorism again, isn't it? We've got the perfect system. It's just these customers, they're causing us some problems with their ever-emerging demands. So that's a big problem, isn't it? And we had a second big problem, actually. We also asked respondents, which we thought would be quite a simple question, is the future brighter for your organisation than the past? And we expected in, land of optimism, of human spirit, we expected that. But no, actually the majority of our respondents said the past was brighter for their organisations than the future. So this is pretty depressing, isn't it? So I'm giving you all of these the problem statement, because the solution needs to be pretty radical. And the problem we have is that we have organisations. Imagine an organisation of 100,000 people in it. All these people are being task managed in this kind of Taylorist, Fordist system, and then we have a load of managers at the top who manage that and make all that happen. That organisation can only be as smart as the managers at the top of it, can't it? Which is a very small number of people. But in fact, you have 100,000 passionate, creative, energised human beings. There must be a better system of work, mustn't there, that harnesses all that creativity that we have and makes it more innovative. And the answer to that question is that you need to be organisationally agile. So if you're thinking here I'm talking about scrums or what you guys do in digital or what those IT guys do, you have the wrong idea. I'm talking about the entire of your organisation, absolutely everybody working in an organisationally agile paradigm. Sound pretty crazy? Well, maybe not, actually, because if I was interested to see the conservative of the conservative, the Harvard Business Review, 2 months ago, had a fully agile organization on their front cover and said this is the only way you should organize your business from now on. So this is an important thing for us. So let me tell you a little bit about, we talk about these things, what does this even mean, you know, outside of IT, what are we talking about here? So let me tell you a few things about what we mean. So a fully agile organization seeks total customer centricity. So this means every single person in your organization, without exception, knows the customer they serve. So instead of an answer today, I work in business analysis, that's what I do, you get an answer, I serve our affluent customer group at the bank. It's always the customer is the first answer. Everybody across the entire organization organized by the customer. Number 2, a real focus on shorter time to value. Across organizations, we don't focus enough on flow of value. So what is our output, who are we giving it to, and how do we speed that up? So you might want to move your entire organization to a sprint cadence as a way to get that sped up. Number 3, a startup culture. We need to really try and ignite that entrepreneurial flame in people. And the way we do that is instead of task management, that's back to that Taylorist system, you do this for me please by next Tuesday, we give people an outcome and describe what that looks like, describe what it feels like. Much more motivating. Again, applicable to the whole organization. And 4, greater responsiveness to change. So many of you in the room right now might be doing your business planning process, where you're trying to work out what's going to happen next year, and you're trying to figure out which customers you might even sell to in December of 2019. That's crazy, isn't it? You'll never find a CFO or an FD that would actually say that what you're planning to happen in December 2019 will actually happen in December 2019. We should be moving to much more real-time strategy and real-time budgeting processes, so getting that responsiveness built into our whole organization. That's just one example. Number 5, a simplified organization. It turns out if you give people outcomes as a way to manage instead of tasks, you no longer need as many managers. Makes sense, doesn't it? So you have a much simpler organization, far fewer layers, easier to run, easier to manage. So that's the nature of a fully agile organization. So I mentioned this survey we've done. We're actually launching it in 6 weeks' time. So this is a soft launch. This is a mini plug, and you can sign up for it later. But we really believe that a fully agile organization is an incredibly powerful concept. And it's not just going to transform organizations. It's actually going to create no less than a positive human future. So a pretty bold statement, I appreciate. And that's why we needed to do this survey. So we spent 12 to 18 months on it to really get the data to back it up. And I thought I'd get you guys involved in this survey to see how you guys compare. So what you need to do is to get your mobile phones out now and go to this site called menti.com. And it's going to invite you to enter this 6-digit code. And then we can have a little bit of audience participation. So I'll give you a second to get organized. Okay, and what you're going to be doing, perhaps if you're multitasked, I'll just explain. You're going to be putting your minds into the respondents of our survey. So to tell you again, they are CXOs of FTSE 100, very large organizations, 500 of them. And you're going to be trying to second guess what they did. If you've seen Family Fortunes, that's what we're doing here. So let's see how this goes. Here is the first question. Thank you. Our survey asked, so I guess the background to this is we had a hypothesis that people would recognize organizations need to be faster for various reasons. They need to innovate. And we asked, how much faster does your organization need to be by 2023 to remain competitive? Have a guess what our respondents said. Very good. I'll let you carry on voting. Now, this is kind of what I expected. You're at a disruption summit, so presumably everybody's going for the far right-hand side here, aren't they? And in actual fact, if you did, you're right. So our respondents said that their organizations, and we gave them a range of processes, how much faster do they need to be? They said they needed to be in aggregate 31% faster across the whole organization. Now, I thought 2 things when I saw that result. I thought, number 1, that's not that much faster, is it? These big monolithic organizations, surely they need to be faster than that. And my reflections are actually that I think really they probably need to be, by the time we get to 2023, they'll still need to be faster than that 31% in actual fact. But also 31% is attainable, isn't it? There's an appealing aspect to this. This is something we can reach, isn't it? This is a goal that's worth going for. So I think you've all voted. So next, so organisations understand they need to be faster. So next, in our survey we also asked, do you plan, so some kind of adoption, this was of organisational wide Agile adoption. So this is quite a big thing. Do you plan to do this in the next 2 to 3 years or 12 months? And see what your thoughts are on that. Okay. Good, I think that's most people. And as it happens, if I pause it just then, you had the exact right answer. Because 73% of organisations in the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, plan to adopt Agile across their entire organisation. I'm not talking an innovation lab or a digital garage, the whole organisation as a way of speeding innovation up. Great. And the final kind of step in the logic chain was this. We asked, do we need to, have people done some voting already? Our final one was to rate the effectiveness of Agile transformation work that you've done so far. So if you do that, and I'll give you some feedback on that. So our organisation is good at making this change. And the result you're getting there is not too far wide of the mark, actually. 99% of organisations were in the somewhat effective and not at all effective. But actually 52% were in the somewhat effective area. So that's pretty damning, actually, isn't it? This is a very powerful medicine for this organisational ailment. How is it we're putting this energy in and we're only getting somewhat effective results? So it's clear to us that we really need to, this is a long journey and it needs a lot of investment from us. So next, what I'm going to do is give you some help with actually getting started on this journey to organisational agility. So I'm going to give you 3 experiments that you can actually start to use tomorrow. And I promise you'll get results from this. So then your next challenge is, how do you scale this in your organisation? And these 3 experiments are quite simple. So number 1, you're going to change the way you manage work and teams. And the experiment is this. You're going to pick somebody, some bright person in one of your teams, and you are going to, instead of task managing them, because maybe they're junior and you want to give them some instruction, but instead of task managing them, you're going to outcome manage them. So about a 6 to 8 week period, you're going to give them an outcome and the acceptance criteria, and then you're going to see how it goes. They're going to report back to you about once a week and say, this is how the feedback was. Questions you're going to ask yourself in this experiment are, what was their motivation like? What was the outcome at the end? Was it better or worse? How much did they learn? And how much did you learn? So these are the questions you will ask yourself as part of this experiment. Experiment number 2. You're going to take a big problem, or medium-sized problem perhaps, that could be solved in about 12 weeks, and you're going to break it down into parts. This is any problem across your business. And I'll give you a hint, all problems, I've yet to find any problem, and I've been in this business for 10 years, that cannot be broken down into parts. So you're going to take a medium-sized problem, you're going to break it down into parts, and you're going to put a cross-functional team on it. And thinking organisation-wide, this is everybody from lawyers, everybody you might need, IT, business folk, everybody you need to solve a challenge. Questions you're going to ask yourself this time are, how easy was it to break that problem down into parts? Again, what did you learn? What did they learn? Was the result better? And I think, I won't spoil it for you, but again, I think you're going to get a positive result from that experiment. And the next one is a really simple one. You're going to take a risk. Now, if you work in the control room of a nuclear power plant and you control the fuel rods, this one is maybe not for you. I'm talking about a risk that is proportionate to the payoff, where you make an investment in this particular risk, it's going to give you a better return, the consequences are containable if it doesn't quite work out, that type of situation. So you're going to pick a situation, take that risk. Questions you're going to ask yourself this time is, again, how much more innovative was the answer? What did you learn? And again, what did your people learn? And the final question, I'm not going to give you the answer to this one, is how can you make all of the risks you take manageable in their impact? So make every single risk a manageable one. And there's a clue there for you. So now I've given you your 3 ways of getting started. I'm around later to advise on those experiments. But your next question is then just how you scale it up, because that is the foundation of organizational agility. So I've taken you through the course of this talk, through our findings that actually organisations recognise they need to innovate. They recognise they need to be much faster as a way to do that. And they also recognise that organisational agility gives them a framework for doing that. It will help give them time for innovating. It will give them execution speed. It will help them take risks in a much more manageable way that actually grow their business and grow their organisations. Now you could say to me, well, yeah, this is fine for someone like Amazon, but you know, it's not going to work in my organisation. And to that counterpoint, I'd give you a quote from the chairman of Maersk. He said that I do not accept that Maersk cannot be just as innovative as Agile, just as innovative as Amazon. And you know what? He's right. Organisational agility is a thoroughly democratic attribute. It's not just for startups, it's for organisations that are both financial organisations through to industry stalwarts. And it'll help make organisations fit to represent the future of business, not just the past. And more than that, and if I'm sounding a bit like a revolutionary here, it's because it is a revolution. It's a fourth industrial revolution. It will make organisations much more profitable, it'll make society fairer, and it'll actually put their happiness back into work. Thank you.